Hey there, Emmanuel here from WebDevFuel and welcome back. Now in this series, again, you're going to learn exactly how to build a website with Astro. And in particular, in today's video, you're going to learn exactly how you can create a mobile header using Astro. So with that in mind, as you can see here at our website, we currently don't have a mobile header. So if we go ahead and shrink here this browser window, as you can see, we get here the same header, so the same menu as we would get on desktop. And what we want to have at the end is here a nice hamburger icon where we can click and then go ahead, open a mobile menu, and then we can also go ahead and close it. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and navigate here back to our code. And here inside our code, we want to start by navigating to our header component. And then here inside the header component, we want to start by doing something, which is we want to hide the current header that we have available inside of our desktop on all mobile devices. And to accomplish that, we simply need to go ahead and use the utilities that TailwindCSS gives us in order to make sure that this part of our code, so the code that displays here this menu, only shows up on screens that are at a particular size or width in this case, or bigger. So in order to accomplish that, and let's just take a look here, for example, let's say TailwindCSS and then responsive, and as you can see, it says here to accomplish a responsive design we have here these breakpoints, and in this case we'll be using here the large one, which is at the minimum width of 1024 pixels. And then this is simply going to go ahead and hide and actually apply this part of the TailwindCSS class only to screens that are larger than 1024 pixels. So in order to hide our menu, let's simply go ahead and add in here large and then colon, and this is going to apply the flex here class only to screens again larger than the large size. And then we want to go ahead and add in here hidden, which means that for all screens that are below this size right over here, as you can see again 1024 pixels, this is going to be actually for all screens that are bigger than this thing right over here, then this size, this is going to be flex, and for those who are smaller, this is going to be hidden. So if we go ahead now and save this, if we go ahead now and shrink here this window, this is going to go ahead and disappear at that particular size that we've defined inside of our class. Now the next step is for us to actually create our mobile header that is going to display when the screen is below the size where this is going to hide. So each time that this goes ahead and gets hidden, we'll simply go ahead and show here a mobile header, again a hamburger menu that we can go ahead and click, and then a menu will pop up. So in order to do that, let's go ahead and navigate here to our source folder and then to the components, and let's go ahead and create a new component, and let's call this one, for example, mobile header.tsx. Alright, so now we can go ahead and open this one. Let's go ahead and export here default function mobile header, and then just to make sure that this works, let's go ahead and add in here a simple div with this text inside of it, and then we can go ahead and import this in here. So let's say mobile header, and actually instead of that, let's go ahead and export const, and let's make this one a arrow function. And now let's see if this imports automatically. Still not, so let's go ahead and change this part to mobile header, and then from mobile header. So now we went ahead here and imported our mobile header component, and we are now displaying it here inside of our page. And as you can see, at the moment this is still displaying for all screen sizes. So it is going to go ahead and apply here this flex rule. So this is why this is looking like this, but we now have our component working. So now let's go ahead and create actually the part that is going again to have all the logic that is going to allow us to have a menu pop up. And in order to do this, we'll use again headless UI, and we'll use the modal component that they provide us, more particularly the dialog component that they provide us, in order to essentially show a dialog that is going to cover the entire screen, and then we'll be able to show our menu and also close it in a very easy way. The first thing we want to do inside this component is we want to go ahead and define the isOpen state, which is going to by default be false. And we also want to have in here this function that is going to allow us to change the open state. So we'll use the useState function hook that React provides us, and again by default this is false. So we'll have access here to the state, to the current state, and then we also have in here a function that is going to allow us to modify the state, and by default again it is going to be false. Now we want to go ahead and show the button that is going to go ahead and open our dialog, our modal. And let's go ahead and do this. So we want to use a fragment. Now, if you're not familiar with this part of React, this essentially means that this is a fragment, and this part is not going to go ahead and show up in our code. But because we want to separate our button from the main dialog, I'm going to go ahead and leave this part of the code like that. So now inside of this, we want to go ahead and add a button, and this button on click. So this essentially means that each time that we click on this button, this is going to set isOpen as true. And what this essentially means is that each time that we click on this, our menu, our mobile menu is going to pop up. Now again, inside of this, we want to use a nice icon. And in order to do that, just like in the previous videos, we're going to go ahead and use here hero icons. And let's go ahead and search for bars in this case. So you can type in here menu or bars, and these 3 different icons are going to show up. And if we go ahead now and let's say that we want to use this one, we can simply go ahead and copy the JSX, and make sure that you copy the JSX because of the attributes which need to be correctly typed for JavaScript, for React inside of JavaScript. So now with that copied, let's go ahead and paste this inside of our code. So now let's also go ahead and make a couple adjustments. Instead of 1.5, the stroke width is going to be 1.75. And then let's go ahead and also change this, the height and the width, to 8 instead of 6. And then on hover, we want this to be text blue 700. Now the reason again that we copied the JSX part is because something like this, so the stroke width would be for HTML, it would look something like this. It would have here this line between the stroke and the width. But in this particular situation for JavaScript, for JSX, we need to always have this as camel case. So with that in mind, we now have in here our mobile header button that is going to allow us to manipulate the state. And if we go ahead now and move back here to our website, as you can see, we have this working, and each time that we hover over it, it changes to the blue color. Next, let's go ahead and add the dialog component to our mobile header component right here. So let's go ahead and type in here dialog, and as you can see in this case, it is going to be auto imported from headless UI React. So now we can go ahead and close this. And then we want to add a couple of things. First of all, we want to add the open state, which is in this case going to be isOpen. So we have in here our state from the useState hook. And then on close, so this is a function that is going to be called each time that we close our dialog. We want to simply go ahead and change the state from true to false. So we simply need to go ahead and, similarly to this case where we pass in here set isOpen to true, in this case we pass false in here. Now inside of this dialog, we also want to go ahead and type in here dialog, but we want to use a component that is nested within this dialog component. So we want to go ahead and grab here the panel, and this is what is going to allow us to essentially display a dialog with classes that we can add to it. So in order to add the classes, we simply need to go ahead and type in here class name, and then inside this class we want to first of all make sure that this is fixed. So this essentially means that the position is fixed on the screen, on the browser in this case, or in the case of a mobile device, inside of the mobile device's browser. And then we want to ensure that at the top it is 0 and the left also 0, so to make sure that essentially this sticks to the sides of the screen. And then we also want to ensure that the height is of the size of the screen, and then the width, same thing. So what this essentially means is that this is going to be 100 v dub, and then in this case it is going to be vh, also 100, and this essentially means that it is sort of 100% of the size of the screen. Now with that in mind, we also want to ensure that the background here is blue, and then we want to add in here a flex that is going to flex on the columns, and then we want to justify on the center, and also add in here item center, so the items also align on the center. So we essentially have a menu that is going to have all of the items centered on the mobile device. So now let's go ahead and save this and see if at the moment this is working. Let's add, for example, an hello world in here. And now, before actually going ahead and trying any of this stuff, we need to add in here a client directive, which is going to be visible. Now, what this essentially means, if you went ahead and watched the previous videos, if not, you can go ahead and watch so you can know exactly how to set up here Astro from scratch. This essentially means that we are actually adding interactivity into this component. So if I left this like this without that directive, if I went ahead and clicked, nothing happened, and that's because again all of this entire site is all static, but the parts that we tell Astro that are not static. So we essentially need to tell Astro which parts of our website are interactive. So with that in mind, if we now go ahead and add this back here, and we go ahead and navigate back to our website, if we click here, as you can see, we now have here this covering the entire screen, and this would look something like this on a mobile device. And then we have here our hello world message centered on the screen. Okay, so now the next step is for us to be able to actually go ahead and close this dialog. So in order to do that, let's simply go ahead and also create in here a button. And in this case, instead of being on click set is open true, we'll go ahead and set is open to false. And then here inside of this button, similarly to this case right here, we want to go ahead here to the hero icons and look here for the X mark. Now this is simply going to be a button that we can go ahead and click. It is going to be an X mark, so we know that we want to go ahead and essentially close this dialog each time that we click on it. And actually I made a mistake, so again, if you see right here, this is not properly formatted for JSX, so let's go ahead and go back here and actually copy the JSX part. And now this has in here class name and all of these in camel case, which is the correct way to add this into JSX. And now let's also again go ahead and make a couple adjustments here to our class. So we want to ensure that this is the same size. So the width and the height are going to be 8, which is equivalent to 32 pixels. And then we want to add in here the following. We want to ensure that this is fixed. And then on the top, this is going to be 80 pixels. So what this essentially means is that TailwindCSS allows us to add arbitrary values here inside of our classes. So we do something like, as you can see here, top 0, and then 0 is already mapped to a particular pixel size. But in this case, we can go ahead and pass something arbitrary, because as you'll be able to see here, the top 6 is 24. And actually the top 5 is 20. This was the one that I wanted to show you. And the top 4 is 16. So because I want to use something that is between those values, I need to actually go ahead and add here an arbitrary value. Now with that in mind, we also want to go ahead and ensure that to the right it is 32 pixels spaced from the screen, from the right side of the screen, and then the text is going to be gray 200, and on hover it is going to be white. And now if we go ahead and navigate back here to our website, as you'll be able to see, if we go ahead and click here, we now have also a button that is going to allow us to close this. And if you go ahead, and you can actually see my keyboard, but if you also go ahead and press the ESC button on your keyboard, this is also going to go ahead and close this by default. And that is for accessibility purposes, which is something that is really cool about headless UI. It automatically adds all of those stuff in terms of keyboard navigation into all of these components without us having to do extra work. Now let's go ahead and add our mobile menu header, in this case not header but actually the title. So let's go ahead and add in here, also similar to this case, dialog.title, and then we want to add in here a class name that is going to be text free Excel, so we have a large enough text that the person can read on the mobile device. And then we also want to add in here the text as white, and then we'll call this one simply menu. Now the reason we are not doing something like this and adding in here, so h1 or even a p tag and adding menu, is because this component right over here also adds the information to the screen readers, so they know exactly what this particular component is. And in this case the title is menu, so someone that is not visiting your website in the common way, so in the way that most people do, they will also know exactly what the title of this dialog right over here is. So now again, if we go ahead and navigate back to our website, and we actually need to go ahead and save the file, as you can see, we now have in here this text that reads menu. And finally, we can go ahead and add the actual menu to our component. So let's go ahead and add in here a simple div tag. And then in here, we simply need to go ahead and add a class name that has the flex and flex call properties, so class names. So what we essentially want to do is, again, we want to flex this as a column, so all of the menu items show on top of each other. And then we want to also go ahead and center here all of our items, and then go ahead and add here space between them. So we are adding here the y-axis because, again, since they are going to show up on top of each other, we want to add space on the y-axis. And finally, let's go ahead and add a margin to the top of 5, which is equal to 20 pixels what this essentially means is that we want to add a margin to the top, so this spaces out here from our menu, so all of these items are going to be sort of a bit apart from the menu, so we have sort of a nice visual representation here of what this menu does. And now let's go ahead and add all of the items. So similarly here to the case on the desktop, we want to add the about, the blog, and the contact us links. So again, we'll start by adding in here an h tag, the a tag actually, and the href in this case is going to be about, and the text in here is going to be about. And now we want to go ahead and add in here the class name that is going to allow us to style this item. So on hover, this is going to be text white. Then the text is by default going to be of size XL, and the text also by default is going to be of the color text gray 200. So let's go ahead just to make it a bit simpler and add this part in here. And let's also go ahead and copy this to the beginning. So now this looks a bit cleaner. So we have by default this both of these classes, and then on hover we switch the text from gray to white. So now let's also go ahead and copy this part and change this to blog. And finally, let's also go ahead and add in here contact. So the contact us is contact-us, and then in here contact us. And now if you go ahead and again move back here to our browser, as you can see, if you go ahead and click here, we now have here a nice looking menu that is going to show up on mobile. Now, in order to ensure that this part of the code does not show up on our desktop, let's go ahead and add here by default on sizes that are of size large or bigger. We want to hide this, and then by default this is going to be a block. So now, as you can see, this is actually hidden, but this is not working because of the flex properties. So let's actually go ahead and do the following. Let's go ahead and copy this part. So we'll delete this part and copy to the clipboard, and let's go ahead and add this in here. And then we want to add in here a class with the same thing. So again, if this is large, so if this is of 1024 pixels or bigger, this is going to be hidden, and if it is smaller, it is going to be block. So display block, which means that we can go ahead and see it. And now, as you can see, this flexes correctly. Now, the reason that this didn't work before, and let's just go ahead and see exactly why, is because if we go ahead and inspect this in here, because we are only going to go ahead and hide this at this level, so here on, so we are only hiding this button, Astro goes ahead and actually renders here our Astro island. And because of that, this is going to go ahead and flex 3 different items, and is going to add here the justified between, which means that this menu is going to show up on the middle, on the center, which we don't want. So now if we go ahead and again do this, and if we add here back the classes around a div tag, as you can see now it doesn't even show, because since we are hiding this mobile header doesn't even render. So now if we go ahead and let's go ahead and shrink the page, as you can see, we now have in here our mobile header that is working perfectly and looks very nice. And this is it. We now have our mobile header, and in the next video of this series, you're going to learn exactly how to set up different taxonomies in order to add offers, tags, categories, and that kind of stuff to your blog. And also in a later video, I'm also going to go ahead and show you exactly how to deploy this Astro website to a Linux server, to an Ubuntu server, to be more specific. I was actually going to go ahead and do this in this video, but before that I actually thought it would be better to first of all go over how to create these different parts of a more complex Astro website, and then in the future I'm going to be releasing as a part of this series also a video on how to go ahead and deploy this Astro website again to a Linux server, so you don't have to use something like Netlify or even Vercel. So if you enjoyed this video, leave a like below. Let me know in the comments exactly what you liked about it, and also what kind of stuff you want to see from this channel about Astro or other stuff related to web development, and also subscribe to get notified of future videos.